Hiring, it's a struggle. You know it is. And that's why you should listen to this particular podcast episode. My guest is Matt DiBara. And Matt comes from 4 generations of proud Masons. And he is the president of DiBara Masonry. And not only that, but he has also launched another company called the Contractor Consultants that specializes in helping construction companies identify and recruit the right people for the right positions in their organization. In our discussion today, we're going to take a deep dive into strategies and tactics that you can use in a very practical way to improve your hiring, both of people in the field and people in the office. This problem is never going away. This problem is only going to get more intense, bringing on the right people, putting them in the right positions in your organization. And we're going to discuss that here today on Construction Genius. Enjoy my conversation with Matt.
This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership.
Matt, welcome to Construction Genius.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure to have you on. And the reason I wanted to have you on is because you have a great deal of expertise in terms of hiring. And I know that's a struggle that a lot of contractors have, bringing in the right people and putting them in the right seats. So tell us, why do you think contractors struggle so much with hiring the right people for their companies?
The shifts in the marketplace, right? My family's been in construction 103 years, and a lot's changed in hiring in 100 years, specifically in the last 5 to 7 years. So the landscape, the hiring landscape's changed so much. 2008 pushed out a lot of contractors. They were like, look, I'm selling, I'm done. I've been through this before, I'm good. And then obviously, we had COVID and some health events there that also shifted the landscape. In the back purview of all this, you have certain technological apps like TaskRabbit and Uber. So the competition for the entry-level worker is so big because it's like, well, do I want to invest in my career where I might make a little less now and go into construction only to have a great retirement, great growth, or should I make a few dollars an hour on something easy that I can do? So there's so much shifting in the landscape, but at the end of the day, there's 2 lines to know. The amount of people entering the workforce is going down. The amount of people that are retiring and leaving the workforce is going up. So that's the ultimate graph that we need to keep in mind.
Okay, so with that in mind, I'm listening to this, and you're talking about macroeconomic and demographic changes that me as a one contractor, no matter how large my company is, I don't necessarily have a tremendous amount of influence on those macro trends. So give me a little insight into what I should be doing to respond to those trends, both on an immediate basis and then also on a long-term basis, perhaps in terms of how I interact with my local business community or the larger national business community in terms of improving hiring.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to piggyback off that, I think the best analogy is it's not that we're building weaker houses, it's that the storms are getting stronger, right? So it's external climate, like you said. 2 million middle-skilled unfilled jobs currently. According to the American Society, ASG, American Society of General Contractors, 80% of contractors are struggling right now to fill work. So if you're not currently feeling it really bad, chances are you will in the future. So what you can do about it on a local scale, we built the first ever contractor hiring course, broke it up into 5 steps. So here's what they are. First, you got to start with a clear understanding. I need to really look at my company and I need to optimize before I maximize. So for example, if my project manager is running around and they're, picking up blueprints or, doing silly errands like dropping off samples, or my office manager goes to Staples and picks up ink, we are in a climate where we need to reduce that waste, right? And we need to get crystal clear on what we need. And I had this expression, I used to look to hire unicorns. So like in my company, Masonry Concrete, like my family business, I used to say an estimator needed to know masonry, concrete, brick, block, stone, stucco, tile. And if they didn't, they would never be hired. And we've changed our thinking now to actually break up more departments and more laser focused skill sets so we could access more of the marketplace. So once you start with that clear understanding and you're really, really sure that there's no waste in your hiring process, meaning you're not hiring unicorns, you're looking and saying, is this a want or is this a need? Because I wanted people to know all those skill sets because it was easier. Hey, can you bid the stucco on this job? Can you throw in the waterproofing? It was convenience, but it wasn't necessity to keep my organization growing. Then you have to move into the finding phase. And there's a lot here. I think we have over 37 different ways to find candidates. The most important takeaway that I found when we built out all this model, endorsed by ZipRecruiter and Indeed, so those are our partners with this, but to give you an idea of how well received it was, but is the fact that there's no magic bullet where you live. It's about figuring out how to leverage all the things that work. And then when you put them in place in your marketplace, you'll get feedback. I'll give you a specific example that ties this together. I was speaking on a stage at RoofCon, and it was a hiring panel. There were 7 of us, and hiring and retention. And so to my left is this gentleman, reminds me of the guys that I worked with in the field, grew up, boots on the ground, really, just a contractor. And so he's saying, you got to go to church, you got to kiss babies, you got to shake hands, you got to meet people, was more or less his exact words. To my right was this woman, and she was very smart and analytical, big corporate. And she's saying, no, you need to use technology. You need to leverage job postings and keyword data. And then I interjected and I said, well, in my experience, you actually need to do both of them and more. So because the climate's so difficult, it's a widespread approach of all the different methods. And then you optimize based on how your local market is receiving the feedback.
Okay, so you got those 2 angles there, the kiss babies and the technology angle. And then you mentioned earlier that the 37 different ways to find candidates. So as you think of that list of 37, what are the most powerful ones that contractors often overlook?
So it depends on what you're looking to hire for. I'll break it out. Let's say office versus field.
Okay.
If you're looking at the field, one of the best ways, I'll give a grassroots strategy that they can literally, if you're taking notes, you can use this right away. There's a funny way how this came about, but that'll be for another time. But basically what you can do is you can go to your suppliers. So for example, where if you're a plumbing contractor, electrical, masonry, concrete, you go to your suppliers and you say, look, I want to sponsor free coffee and donuts Monday through Saturday from your 2 or 3 busiest hours, from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., whatever it is. I'm going to put a booth. It's literally going to have, great donuts, warm coffee, totally free. It'll help your business. In exchange for that, I want to do one thing. I want to put these little cards, they're called recruiting cards, and I want to put them on that table. And what this does is it gets you in front of those people that are gainfully employed. It gets you in front of people that are trusted with a company truck and they're actively working. So if you have methods, and we'll get into how that card has to have what it needs to have on it, we could talk about that. But that's one way, one strategy, because what we found is, let's call him in this case Joe. Joe shows up to work, he's 2 minutes late. His boss yells at him and says, hey, you're 2 minutes late. What are you doing? You're dumb, whatever, right? Because construction is not a perfect industry. Joe drives to the suppliers. He's waiting for the forklift to load up all the material. And he looks and sees coffee and donuts. And then he sees his card, hiring, top pay, starting at X. And he goes, wow, that's $3 an hour more than what I make. It's these strategies. So that's one tactic that you can use in the field.
Let's stop a minute because I like this. Tell me what's on the recruiting card.
So on the recruiting card, if you want to maximize efficiency, there's a couple of things you need to do. Number one, you want the card to have a QR scanner, right? A lot of people in construction, we're getting more tech savvy. The other thing you want to do.
So hold on, just so people know, the QR scanner is you can go with your phone and they can take a photograph and it takes them out to a website, something like that. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah, exactly. It's basically a barcode, and they'll use their phone to scan that, and it'll pull them up to the hiring website or the job description.
Nice.
So
go on.
Correct. And also on the card, you want to have, and I call this in the course, we call this leveraging the gaps. So I'll explain where it comes from and then how it ends up on the card. So one of the most important things that we found is you need to have incentives that make you stand out in the marketplace and make somebody go, I want to work for this company. Well, what are some of those examples? 4 10-hour days, local travel, guaranteed per diems. You want to find things in your company that are exciting and unique. And if you can't think of any, pull your team in, interview your best people and say, why do you love working here? If you still can't think of anything, do some research on some of the biggest cities around you, 60, 80, 100 miles away, and look at what they're offering, because they have endless budgets. And if you can steal one of those strategies and be the first in your local market, we've seen great. We have a demolition contractor and union, and he offers massages, professional massages every 2 weeks because it's backbreaking work. Little things that they go, wow, that's interesting. Once you find them, you put them on the recruiting card, it gets that excitement.
Okay, so on the recruiting card, you've got the QR code so that people can contact you. And then you've got some incentives on there or some highlights about working with your company that would give people a reason to contact you and to look into working with you. Is that right?
Correct. And then you need one other big piece. And the biggest thing you want is you want a career video. You need a video that's 1.5 minutes to 2.5 minutes long where they can literally, while they're drinking their coffee or they're using the restroom, they can watch this video and they can fall in love with you as a company. Need to showcase because there's
and
nothing.
That's going to be on the web page that after they've scanned the QR code, that's what they're going to see the first thing on the web page.
Exactly. Yeah. You want your career video front and center, and you want that video to do a couple things. Number one, be really authentic to who you are. If you're a big company and you're very corporate, lean into that. Number two, you want it to showcase your office, your trucks, your team. And number three, you want testimonials of your team working there. This is Joanna. She's been working here 20 years and she comes on for a 10-second cut. I love this company. They hired me straight out of high school or college. And I bet you want the company to have we connect visually as humans, right? Think of your favorite movie versus your favorite book. There's emotional connection. You want that to occur.
Okay, excellent. All right, so we've just hit the field side. That was super helpful, very practical. Let's now go to the office side. Let's say I'm wanting to recruit project engineers, project managers into my organization. Give us some hidden or underused tips that you think could be very helpful.
Two of them that I'd start with right away. Number one, I would leverage geofencing. So geofencing is a technology where, in essence, I can put an invisible fence around a location. And if I access a digital device, iPad, phone, or computer, I now can target you on that device so you can see my ads. So you want to hire a company that knows how to do this, full disclosure, company that knows how to do it, and also does it specifically for hiring. There's a lot of companies that geofence for book promotions or movies or things like that. But if they don't know this niche, feel free to, at the end, I'll give you my info. We'll give you some companies if you're listening and you want additional support. But if you find a company that knows how to do this, they'll handle the technical side of it. Where you geofence is important. Project engineers and estimators, number one, your competitors. You can geofence your competitors so that when they're walking in, they can see an ad that says, commercial estimator, starting pay blank, and the 3 benefits in the headline. They click it, it's your ad.
Okay, so just let me. I'm going to do I'm going to feed it back to you from my perspective. What you're saying is that you're advertising for these positions, for project engineer, estimator, project manager, and you're doing the ad around the area where your competition's office is.
Correct.
Okay,
exactly.
And you're using that geofencing strategy so that you're targeting. You're more likely to target the people that you're going after and improve your hiring in that way.
Exactly, and that's one.
Yes.
Now. Also, you can do this with your suppliers and you can do it with other locations where they might be, trade schools, universities.
Yes.
But I would go one step further.
Yep.
We have another section in the course called partner lists. And what I would do is I would reach out to the best trade schools and the best universities that have good construction management programs.
Yeah.
Because they keep in touch with their alumni lists. They want them to do well. And I would send an email saying, hey, we're hiring, build a relationship. And that's the power of one to many. One contact, many potential candidates.
I think that's one of the most underutilized ones that the contractors, I know a lot of contractors have actually done this where they'll become like the adjunct faculty at a local university and they'll teach construction management courses and they'll do it over a period of years and they just recruit as a result of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
That's excellent. Okay, so we've got a specific recruiting tactics for the field and the office. I'd like you to talk a little bit about, you talked about if you're corporate, you got to lean into it in order to be authentic in the way that you present yourself. What is your experience in terms of the missteps that contractors make when they're hiring in terms of aligning their culture with their hiring process?
Well, the culture needs to show up on that video. So with contractors, the biggest thing we do is we define their culture, right? We want to define what it is that makes the company unique. Culture is really about the unspoken rules or the unspoken lay of the land.
Okay.
You know good culture when, like, for example, we see good culture when I'll be working with a client, and if I happen to be in person or my team's there filming the career video for them, you'll see somebody say, no, we don't do that here, or no, it's these unspoken standards that are just met, and it's not through brute force of saying you do this, you do this, you do this. It's everyone buys into that centralized mission and thesis, and then it's transmitted throughout the entire organization. So getting really clear on what your culture is important, and then amplifying that in that career video. And there's different examples if you want to get into what that culture could look like.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. First, what I want to ask is how do the best companies actually, because you're saying something, there's like a sense of the way things are done in a company, but yet in order to be proactive in leveraging that culture, I need to be able to articulate it clearly. So what do the best companies do to actually articulate it in such a way that people can say, oh yeah, that's it?
Well, we want to work backwards. So I'm a simple guy, right? I'm a field guy. I started laying brick at 11. I was working at 9. So everything with me is very practical. So I start with looking at what's the end goal. The end goal of good culture, truly, I believe, is 2 things. I want to keep my team for a long time. I want to hire somebody and I want them to retire here. Right. That's goal number 1. Goal number 2 is while they're here, I want the most output. I want productivity. I want you to be motivated. I want you to have a good attitude, right? But if you put productivity as the main goal, everything stems from that. Because if I'm not motivated, my productivity is down. If I don't feel rewarded or valued, I don't have good productivity. So culture is really, in essence, if you were to just boil it down to its most simplified things, it's I want you to be here from when I hire you to retirement. And while you're here, I want max productivity. And I have this very simple way of looking at things in life. I do what's called a simple, I call it the Matt Venn diagram. And so what I do, and you can do this yourself, right? If you're in a company, depending on the position, I go on a paper and I draw the 2 circles, right? And I have them overlap slightly in the middle. So a Venn diagram. Yep. And what I do is I put on my selfish hat. I'm a business owner and I want only what's best for me. And I write down all the things that I selfishly want in my business if I'm the owner. Right. Then I take that hat off and I put on my employee hat. I'm a selfish employee and I only want what I want. And I write that in the other circle. And then what I do is I look to find in the middle, what are the things that work and align, or how can I align those 2 goals? Because ultimately that's what we're trying to do. And there's give and take on both sides. But that exercise, I mean, it's so simple. But when you can do that, it's almost laughable. When you can really be like, this is all the dream list of me is just, I don't care about the employee for a moment, just me, boom. And then it's like the employee, I don't care about the company. And then you merge. That's how you come up with what good culture is. But I can show you, we can talk about some examples we see that work really well.
Yeah, please do. Let's give some practical examples.
So one of the things we found is that pay is important, but it's by far not the most important thing. Team members want to feel valued.
Right.
They want to feel like their work is appreciated. The most important thing we see, among the most important, is if you want A players, you need to give autonomy and you need to have a scorecard. If you want to keep A players need to know how to make an A. You have to be crystal clear. They don't do well with ambiguity. They want to know this is the target, and when they can see it, they want to exceed it. A lot of companies don't have clear defined KPIs, outcomes, and goals. And so sometimes there's unsaid friction. Another thing we see with companies that rock in the culture side of things and do fantastic is there was a mentor of mine years ago, and he told me, he says, Matt, nothing changes until the unsaid is spoken. And so in a company, when you can have really good open communication that channels up, I mean, and we see this with multi-billion-dollar corporations. CEO of a megacorp is down at the factory level, listening to the people who are assembling the boxes, saying, "Hey, what would be easier for you? What do you enjoy? What's making this harder?" When you have that level of channel and communication, huge. And then auditing.
Hold on a second. I want to explore that a little bit. Okay, nothing changes until the unspoken is said. Is that how you said it?
No, the unsaid is spoken.
Unsaid is spoken. Okay.
Yeah.
What are some examples of unsaid things that need to be spoken in a construction company?
For example, I need more support on this job. I can't hit this timeline. this new person you hired isn't going to work out.
Right. Hey, this is Eric. I hope you're enjoying the discussion with Matt. I know I am. So what happens once you bring on the right people and put them in the right positions? Well, then you need to retain them by giving them the training and the development that they need. One strategy that you could employ right at the jump is give them a copy of my book, Construction Genius. Effective, hands-on, practical, simple, no BS leadership, strategy, sales, and marketing advice for construction companies. This book will revolutionize the leadership of your organization. All you need to do is to go out to Amazon, purchase a copy for yourself and the leaders in your company. Do what many construction companies are doing. They're purchasing the book. They are then having a little reading club with their leadership team. You read a chapter or two every month. You get together, you discuss takeaways, and then you make incremental changes based on what you've learned from the book over the next 12 months. There's 12 chapters. So if you do 2 chapters a month, you can get this done in 6 months. And I promise you that the way that this book is written, it makes the information easily digestible. It's written in a very simple, straightforward manner. And I know that you will tremendously benefit from reading it. So go out to Amazon, get yourself some copies, and improve the leadership of your team. All right, now back to my interview with Matt. So then how does a CEO, because what happens, right, is that CEOs are people, because the CEO writes the checks or, does the promotions, et cetera, people are less likely to want to tell the CEO the truth if they think that truth telling is going to get them in trouble, so to speak. So how do CEOs make sure that they don't just have a bunch of yes men and women just shaking their head and saying, dude, you're awesome, and that they're willing to tell the truth?
We created a technology for this called an honest employee audit. It's the first step. There's 2 of them. One is to frequently audit your team anonymously. 1 through 10 scale. We have, I think, 12 or 14 questions. Gives you a real good look at how people feel across all the key areas. Yeah. And it's mind-blowing, the results.
What are those key areas? What are those key areas I should focus on?
So you want to get into, do I feel valued, right? So we're trying to get down into we're working backwards from that end goal of what establishes good culture. So it's,
right.
Do I feel valued? Do I have the right resources? Do I feel like I can communicate? So it's drilling those down into a 1 to 10 scale to see, do I feel like my pay is fair? So, and those are just some examples. So you can start to see it's what it is in essence, Eric, is it's probing the typical areas that most companies don't feel comfortable talking about. Does my manager listen to my feedback? Do I feel like, I'm given the right resources? Are my timelines realistic?
So let me ask you this then. How useful is anonymous feedback in terms of the CEO being able to address specific issues?
Very, very useful, because you see it's compartmentalized. You can literally, when you aggregate this data, you can literally see patterns and trends in either departments, or you'll see it in you can, if you have a bigger company, if you've got 50 or 100 employees plus, you can do these per department. So, right. You don't want less than say 5 or 10 people, but when you get over 50 or 100, it's like, well, this is just a big blob, and management has their gripes and it's messing up the averages. So you want to do it department focused if your company has that org structure. But you'll be able to see, oh wow, I have a communication issue from management to my team, or I have an expectation issue, or pay just for whatever reason isn't being communicated well because I'm scoring 30% on a 1 to 10 scale on this average.
Okay, so if I'm doing that anonymous survey, which I get the logic of that, I appreciate it. I still may be in a meeting with my executive team, and for whatever reason, they're not willing to tell me the truth. And typically what I find in that situation is the reason why is because the way that the CEO has behaved in the past when the truth is told, it makes their team unwilling to tell them the truth because they know the consequences of doing that. So let's say I'm a CEO who I built this great company because I do kick ass and I am great at what I do, but I know that I'm a little hard to approach. What can I do right away to make myself more approachable so that people are more willing to tell me the truth?
Well, I think just to put a bow on what we said before, the nice thing about the anonymous survey is that it shows you, because the executive team might not want to disappoint you, right? Hey, are we going to meet all these deadlines? Yeah, we'll be fine. You get the anonymous survey, it's like, timelines are unrealistic. I'm scoring a 10%. Whoa, wait a minute. There's a disconnect now. My executive team is going, yeah, everything's fine. Everything's good. Yeah. Is the team happy and motivated? Oh, yeah, Matt. They're all good. Don't worry. You have nothing to worry about, Matt. They're happy with their pay. You sure? Oh, yeah. Well, what does the anonymous survey say? I'm scoring a 20 out of 10. 20% average. No, they're not. So it does actually surpass. That's the whole point, is you're getting it directly from the team. So that's one particular kind of point I wanted to drive home. Then when it comes to the specific CEO and their executive team, that comes down to team building, trust, and communication. You have to, as a leader, allow for that communication and not react. And we give a lot of examples of this, pulling people aside one-on-one versus in the group. Like, what do you mean you forgot to do this? What do you mean 5 people quit in front of the whole executive team? Yeah. There's a lot of communication there.
Yeah. Okay. So then let's go to the hiring process itself, because I know a lot of folks struggle with this. So I've got a resume in front of me. Maybe I've done a good job creating that video, like you said. So I've got the right person in terms of their technical skills. How do I structure the interview process so that I filter out the B players and increase my likelihood of hiring A players?
So, a couple of things. You have to be able to sift, sort, and screen very quickly.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because you're going to need exponentially more front-end candidates than you think. Meaning you're going to need a lot more resumes to find what you want. It's different now. So knowing that, we built a model. So it starts, and it depends field versus office, and the entire, again, we built a whole course on this, but I'll give you some actionable ones. One thing you can do is you need a quick 3 to 5 minute informal interview that, and I'll just use a field example because it's easy, but that nails down a few quick, easy questions, right?
Yeah.
How do you present on the phone? Are you swearing? Are you, is there background noise? Are you taking it seriously? Like, how do you present communication wise?
So this is a phone call, 3 to 5 minute phone call.
Typically, there's automation, there's text, there's a lot of things you can do, but imagine you have the resume and you're going to talk to them. You would do a short call with 3 to 5 quick screener questions, right? Yeah. So it would be, how many years experience? Let's use electrical. How many years have you been in the business? I usually like one technical qualifier. So you might say, great, awesome. So, I'll give a masonry example. If you were going to build a 6 foot long or tall, 100 foot long wall, how many block a day might you lay? Like one question that gives you a tangible technical expectation, and that's it. And then you move them to the next round. The big thing though, I think that's probably also we see as kind of the biggest struggle is not having a skills assessment. Okay. Every single company needs a skills assessment before they move on to, usually we do a final interview, or you could do it after the final interview, depending on the quality of the candidate and timeline.
Okay, so we're talking about a field person. You've got that 3 to 5 minute conversation out of the way. The next step is the skills assessment. For
field or office, it's some front end qualifier, right? So for the office, you could have some screening questions on your resume, which is, on your submission. So, if you do Indeed or some of those platforms, you can put questions, but you want something on the front end that's quickly sifting through a lot of people. Yeah. So it's a superficial, do they have anything listed on the resume that's relevant? Great. Well, then how do I screen it quickly? It's either answer these 3 questions. With office roles, you tend to have more potential candidates. Yeah. With field roles, it's usually better to get them on the phone and not try and do something digitally, is what we found. But then the next step can be a little bit more of an in-depth interview, but which would be a 20 to 30 minute interview where you're really diving in on those things. Mm-hmm. Or it could be a skills assessment, depending on the quality of the candidate. So having them demonstrate their skill set if you feel like they're good.
Okay. So does that mean you would say, hey, come out to the job site on Thursday at 7:30 and let me just give you a couple minutes? What does that look like?
No. So the way it works, office versus field, again, we'll draw that line. If it's field, typically, like, for example, in my actual construction company, we have them come to my yard. I have a worksheet that literally is like, this is how many brick you have. Here's a photo of what it should look like when it's done. Here's the materials. And I have them build a composite wall. I have them lay block, brick, if they can do stucco. So we have an intake process. We're like, all right, based on your assessment, you have block skills, brick skills, stone. Okay, no stucco. We'll leave that one out. No concrete. Great. Then we literally pay them. It's paid. And they have 8 hours and they get to build it. And we get to see what they do. And so there's because the hardest thing now is our teams don't love, you'll kill culture if you bring Joe in. You're like, Joe's great. He's going to be the best thing ever. And then a week later, Joe isn't worth, keeping. And now the team's like, oh, great. So every time you do that, they're like, here comes another Joe. We'll be here one week.
Yeah. Okay. So that skills assessment, that's interesting. So again, what you're doing here is you're almost doing what construction companies do, where they just hire a dude and throw him on the job site and sink or swim, but you're doing it in a little more intentional way, and you're doing it in such a way so that it doesn't damage the attitude of the folks in the field. It's costing you a little bit of time, it's costing you some money, but it's worth it in exchange for not screwing up the culture of your company.
That, and also workers' comp. You put them on your payroll, 3 days later they get injured. I mean, there's all kinds of intrinsic benefits for why you wouldn't want to do this.
That's beautiful. Okay, so you've got the skills assessment. Is there a third step after that?
Well, yeah, and there's also a skills assessment for office roles. So, for example, if you're hiring an operations manager or an estimator, like commercial estimator is great. Here's a bid. We've already done it. Average time is 2 hours. We're going to pay you $100. We haven't filled out a sheet, so it's all documented. It's legitimate. They sign for expectations. You really need to make sure the documentation's there. But yeah, every single role should have some type of demonstrable skill set to it.
Okay, so the biggest mistake a lot of contractors make is they bring on a guy or a gal. They do have the skill set, but then they're not a culture fit. So how does that come into the interview process that you're describing here?
Well, the skills assessment helps define culture. Because if you wanna show up, for example, I'll use my company and some of the clients. People show up late. They don't bring tools. They don't dress with proper clothes. You can define so much culture on the office side. Emails. We've seen clients where they're like, "This person was great," but their email was like all lowercase, no commas. Like they couldn't believe it. They're like, "How in the world?" They interview well. They have a great resume, but that's not how we do emails here at my company. So you actually get to vet the culture and how they interact. For example, they come to your yard, or your office, right? Do they say hi to other people? Right. How do they react? Like you get to judge the culture we have a whole kind of behind the scenes. We evaluate culture. Where do they park? Do they ask to park? Some people will park in a designated spot for management. They'll just pull in and park. It'll be like manager. And they're like, get out. And my project manager's like, oh, that's interesting. Usually the ones we usually end up keeping ask, hey, can I park here? Like I see it says so there's all these ways to validate culture while you're doing the skills assessment.
Okay. I like that. Okay. So then let's say I'm listening to this and I'm like, Matt, it's all well and good, but I got projects to build and I just need to bring in warm bodies. And I'm going to filter through them, and I'm just going to keep banging my head up against the wall until I get the guys or the gals in place that can do the work that needs to be done. If I'm consistently getting the wrong people in the door, what do I need to do immediately to fix that?
I mean, we do all this for them. So we have an entire done for you model with this. So we vet it because there's a lot of screening stuff on the front end. The biggest thing is at every single interval, you have to be analyzing the data and figuring out what am I letting through and why, and because I call it the law of reversibility. Meaning if I'm letting through people that I don't want, there's a good chance that I'm also polarizing, meaning pushing out people I do want. So I want to try and understand that. I need to try and figure out am I going to the wrong place where I'm doing the targeting? Am I asking too many questions up front? So it's conceptually it's great, but you have to put the time into tweaking this model. Recruiting now has become a lot like marketing in the sense that you have to dive into the data points. It's like, well, am I attracting the right type of lead? Why are they dropping? Oh, I'm communicating too much maybe, or not enough. And so it requires a lot of analytics for you to figure it out. There's no magic bullet of, oh, if you're not getting the right people, it's because of X. We've seen it break points on all different areas throughout the process.
Who in a construction company should be responsible for this data analysis that you're describing here?
I'll be totally honest with you, Eric. So here's what happened, right? We made the contractor hiring course, and then we found out that most companies, if you're doing $1 million or over, just needed it done because it requires the HR function of a role. There's so much to do already with culture, paperwork, workers' comp issues, the internal, nuts and bolts of the company, that when you add all this in, it's difficult. I mean, it takes time. It definitely takes time. Ideally, your HR person, who's in your company, guy or gal, but it's a commitment. I mean, you're building a model here, and it's constant work. I mean, there's no one size fits all. There's no guaranteed approach. It's like testing and tweaking and then figuring out what works and then optimizing it.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think you said it there very well, is that you do have to test and tweak. And if you're doing the same things over and over again and not getting the results you want, then that might show you that you need to change your approach a little bit here. So we've talked a lot about some strategies, tactics, some overall philosophies here. As we're wrapping up the interview, if I wanted to immediately improve my hiring, let's say this year, I know that maybe it's going to take some time, but let's say I'm having this conversation in February of 2024 and my hiring has improved dramatically. What is it that I've focused on in that 12-month period to improve my hiring?
Honestly, this is going to sound simple. The biggest thing is dedicating. I think there's a couple. The biggest one though is just making sure you're dedicating more time. I have an example, and I'll describe it because I don't have the visuals when I speak. But I have an example, and the first slide is the hill we think we're climbing, and it's a guy, and you see his feet, and he's stepping over a little sandcastle at the beach, right? So he's like walking over it. And then the next slide is somebody climbing Mount Everest, and they're like on the edge of a peak, and they're looking up the mountain, and it's straight up. And so I think the biggest issue is a lot of construction companies, as was myself in 2018, are completely underestimating how big of an issue this is and how much bigger it's going to become. And so with big problems, big time allocation and resources. Well, it's calendaring the time to really be meeting about this and diving into some of the strategies and tactics that we discussed. The other thing, and this is a question we've asked a lot of companies, and I think it'll glean some perspective. We ask companies, if you were to keep every single person you've ever hired since you've been in business, would you have a hiring problem? And most companies laugh and say, no. So focusing on retention, making sure that you're keeping your people, because what we see with some clients, right, is if they don't fill the retention gaps, it's like we help them bring somebody in. So we do all the work for them. They just show up on final vetted interviews, right? And they get success and they do well. But if they're not really doubling down on retention, it's like 1 in, 2 out, one in, 1 out. And it's so hard and so costly to replace somebody. So we can talk about some retention strategies, but retention is a big one.
I think that might be some good stuff for a future interview there, Matt. Tell us a little bit more about your company and what you do.
So my company, I think just backstory. So I own a masonry concrete company here in Los Angeles, and I hit the wall in 2018 with hiring. So I'm doing government work, commercial work, and then I just couldn't hire. I lost nearly $700,000 worth of overruns and jobs. And so it took me 3 years. I spent near $1 million of my own money trying to figure out what worked. Couldn't find a system. We put it together, and I was helping contractors I knew. I never meant to build out a course. And so we did what's called the contractor hiring course, because I had a baby on the way, and my other half, Marjorie, was like, hey, you can't be out all the time talking about this hiring stuff. So we made a course. Right. Then what happened was contractors took it, but we found bigger ones they're like, hey, we don't have the time. So what my company now primarily does is all that front end legwork, we do it all for you, the contractor consultant. So it's outsourced hiring. Okay. So we do all of the resume postings. We build out all the assets, the hiring cards, the recruiting cards, everything you need to basically, all the business owner does is show up on pre-approved, vetted, screened, qualified interviews. That's it.
And this is for field and office?
Correct.
Okay, excellent. So how can people get in touch with you if they'd like to and learn more about your company?
Yeah, the website, the Contractor Consultants, plural.com, or send me an email. I'd love to see if we can help. We can even just send you some good resources from the course, or, our mission is to help 1 million contractors. So, I'd love it if anybody listening, if we can help, we'll send you resources. We'll refer some geofencing companies. My email is MD and then at the company. So at the Contractor Consultants, plural.com.
Okay. MD at thecontractorsconsultants.com. Excellent. Matt, I appreciate your time. I got one more question for you. Let's say I'm flying into LA and I need to hit a restaurant. What's the one restaurant in LA I'm going to?
What kind of food do you like?
It's up to you, man. I'm easy. I'm not a fussy eater.
Not a fussy eater? That's a good question. I would get a good steak. I'd go to like a Mastro's. There's a good steak restaurant out there.
Mastro's, huh?
We'd celebrate. It'd be a celebratory meal.
Awesome. Mastro's, and that's Mastros?
Yeah.
Excellent. We'll put a link in the show notes to Mastro's in LA. Matt says if you want a steak, you got to go there. Yeah. Matt, I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you for the tactics and the strategies and the perspective, and I do wish you all the best. Thank you for listening to my discussion with Matt today. I hope you found it useful. I certainly did. There's a number of strategies and tactics that you can use right away to improve your hiring. And if you are interested in contacting Matt, go out to his website, thecontractorsconsultants.com, and learn more about the work that he does. One quick ask I have of you before you jet away. Feel free to share this interview with other contractors that you think would benefit from listening. And feel free to go out to wherever you get your podcasts and give Construction Genius a rating and a review. That helps the show to get seen across the interwebs. We're in the top 50 of management podcasts on the Apple podcast thingamajig, whatever you call that. And we want to get higher. Come on, let's get us into the top 20 or the top 10. That's what we want to do here. So feel free to share the show with other people. And I appreciate you listening to Construction Genius here today.